anyone that would like to have an outline of where we will go in the next 24 minutes or whatever length of time we might have, if you would like a copy of that, there's probably not one for everyone, but certainly use them all up, because I don't have any need of, I think my wife probably brought her own today, didn't you? So, and she probably won't destroy it until after we've been home for a while anyway. It's good to see each of you here this morning. What we are doing in this message this morning is trying to finish what I started last Sunday. Unfortunately, because of time, I'm not sure that we will finish it. So just understand this. It's all over today. So if you didn't take one of those little outlines, I'm sorry. Maybe you'll find one somewhere outside the door as you leave, and you can take it and finish the sermon on your own. Won't that be fun to write your own sermon this week? The title of what we've been talking about is Let's Talk About It. And it's a story of a couple named Isaac and Rebekah. Last week we discovered that Rebekah was selected, I believe, by God the Father for Abraham's servant who went to find a wife for Abraham's son, Isaac. And the circumstances that God brought about made it very clear to Eliezer that Rebekah was the one God had chosen. And we closed last week by saying this: no marriage by any Christian is going to have the blessing and the favor of God without God helping you make the decision of who it should be, whether it be a man for you ladies or a woman for you fellas. God ought to be primary in your decision capability. And how does he make it clear? By prayer. By prayer. I don't think you have to set a fleece before God, but you can certainly say to him, I want you to help me with this choice. In fact, I want your choice for me to be the one that is selected. Now that's basically point number one, and we, for the most part, got through that without a great deal of difficulty, but now here's where the rubber meets the road. Those of you who have been married for a while know that there is rubber that kind of gets messed up on the roadway of life. And there was, in this home, even with God's assistance in making the choice, there was a tragic decline in the relationship between Isaac and Rebekah. I'd like to explore that with you a little bit. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't believe it was a lack of love. The Bible plainly says Isaac loved Rebekah. I think he loved his wife. When he first saw her, I think he fell in love with her. And I don't think that love really ever dimmed. In fact, 20 years later, in a public situation, another party saw Isaac having a wonderful time with his wife, which probably could have and should have been carried inside the tent walls of their home. I mean, he was still madly in love with Rebekah that long after their union. But can I just say this? As much as you may love your wife or love your husband, love isn't all there is to a marriage. Love also depends upon a deep communion of your soul to one another. I do see little, if any, evidence that Isaac and Rebekah ever developed that kind of a home, that kind of a marriage. One problem may have been they didn't have any kids. I kind of wonder if Isaac resented that. I mean, if you're trying to have kids and you don't have any kids, it gets kind of discouraging along the way. What are you going to do if you want something? You actually need something, because Isaac is in the line of God's promise that he's going to make a great nation out of Abraham's seed, and he's a part of that formula, but he doesn't have a child with his wife. I want you to know that 20 years went by before finally, Isaac finally used his head and took the whole situation to God in prayer. You want to read about it in chapter 25 of Genesis and verse 21. 25, verse 21. Now Isaac, now understand, this is 20 years after he got married to this woman, pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And guess what? The Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now, prayer is not a magic wand. Perhaps someone is here and you would say to me privately, you know, I've prayed about a situation like that in my life, my home, and God has not chosen to answer that prayer. And I can't tell you why God would not do that. I know of many friends who have gone through that struggle, that situation in life. I also know of some who have realized we just cannot have our own child. So in the case of my youngest son, they decided, much to our joy and delight, to adopt. And so they invited little David into their home. He didn't have a sling. He didn't come with the ability to sling rocks at giants, but little David came into their home. It was a wonderful day when he came. And then they heard about baby Josiah. He was biologically the brother of David. What are you going to do? Have two brothers be separated? Not that way. So Josiah became a member of the family. But the biological mom wasn't done yet, and it wasn't long until wonderful little Benjamin came along. What's a family to do? Well, the house they lived in was too small for another kid, so they decided, we better find us a bigger home, and they did. And Benjamin was able to come and live in a not brand new, it was a used home, but it was big enough now for 3 boys. But mom still wasn't finished. Isn't it funny how one person who'd like to have children couldn't have children, another lady who probably shouldn't have had any children had another one. so Michaela came into Paul and Tanya's home. I thought, phew, because Mom has now been declared unfit to have any more children, according to the court. So we thought, family of 4, that's fine. We only had 3, but what's 4? It's wonderful, right? Yeah, it really was. Loved all 4 of them. What a beautiful portrait. But for my son and his wife, they said, we've heard about an orphanage down in Haiti, and we think we'd like to take a plane down to Haiti and look over the children in that orphanage, and guess what? They spotted Maurice, just a tiny little type. They said, Maurice belongs in our home. That's where Maurice has grown up. And so now, the childless couple have 5. Here's a couple who could not have children, but in answer to prayer, God gave them twins. Wonderful, isn't it? Finally, after 20 years of marriage, they're now going to invite 2 boys into their home. But can I tell you something? Having babies does not solve problems. As a matter of fact, these 2 young'uns that they had, Jacob and Esau, it was a pretty big struggle trying to raise these 2. I think it was really a basic problem of communication. Remember Rebecca when the servant of Abraham spotted her? She was this young, vivacious, vibrant, talkative, enthusiastic gal who, when the old servant of Abraham said, could I have a drink of water from the well? She says, well, you sure can. And guess what? I'm also going to pour enough water into the trough to satisfy your camels. He had 10 of them. And as we learned last week, to fill them up, right, take around 50 gallons per camel. But this young gal, she gave them enough water until they were all satisfied. Isaac with his, and you'll know this if you've read anything about Isaac, he's a guy who's retiring. He loves solitude, just to get along. He likes to be alone. Now, not everybody is like Isaac. Certainly not Rebecca. Isaac liked silence. Maybe some of you are like Isaac. I will say this to you, that the lack of companionship and growing when the twins were born created additional problems in this home. Rebecca just longed for somebody to have contact and someone she could talk to. I think her growing bitterness, and you'll see that if you read her story, grew out of this kind of failure in her marriage. I think her voice may have taken on a little bit of a caustic tone. And her face developed lines of disgust. Have you ever seen some lady's face develop lines on it? And you say, you know, she just looks disgusted with life. watch people very much, and that's a fun occupation to just sit somewhere and look at people's faces and see what you can tell about who they are and what's going on in their life just by what their face looks like. Isaac, I think, during the years of his marriage, became more and more tone deaf to the frequency of Rebekah's voice. He just didn't hear her anymore. She could talk, he didn't pay attention. Anyway, when Rebekah conceives these two boys, she has a violent pregnancy. And of course, Isaac, in his love of solitude, wasn't much help to her. And so, where do you go when you don't have a husband to talk to? Rebekah went to the right place. She went to the Lord in prayer. And you will read about her plea to the Lord in verse 22 of chapter 25. But the children struggled together within her, for they're born. They're already fussing and fighting with each other. And she said, "If all is well, why am I like this?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. I never expected this kind of a life, Lord, when I said yes and came along with Abraham's servant to this land 500 miles away from home, to a husband that won't talk to me. It's very important to know that when she went to the Lord in prayer, the Lord talked right back to her. Do you know what the Lord said? Well, of course you do. It's written right there in the Bible, verse 23. God says to Rebekah, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other. And the older, listen to this, the older shall serve the younger. That's unheard of in the culture of that day. It was always the oldest kid that got the great blessing, the great approval to be the head of the family. When God spoke to Rebekah, he said, it's going to be vice versa. Your younger son is going to be the one with the power, with the blessing. Your older son, yeah, he'll survive, but he's going to serve the younger one. Now the sad thing, because of this lack of communication between Isaac and Rebekah, you know what I suspect? When God spoke to Rebekah and gave her this information, I don't see any evidence that she ever told Isaac what God told her. Now, if you find some proof that I'm wrong, you come and tell me. But I don't believe so. You say, why don't you believe it? Because it's never stated. But number 2, in the great faith chapter of the Bible, Isaac is commended for his faith because of his belief in what God did by his blessing Jacob. Not Esau, Jacob. And it should have been just the opposite, because who did Isaac love of the 2 boys? he loved the one that was a good hunter, could take his bow and arrow. We heard this morning that Mike is a great bowman. I wonder how many deer he shot with his bow and arrow. I don't know. We didn't get a chance to ask him in Sunday school this morning. But he evidently learned how to shoot that at a much younger age, so maybe he's got a rack filled with racks of deer. I don't know, but Isaac gets to the point where he says, you know, I feel like maybe my life is about to end, and it's time for me to give my oldest son a blessing. Why not? That's the way it was done. And as far as I know, he had never been told. God said not the older one should get the blessing, but the younger one. Why? Because Rebekah didn't have a line of communication with him. She and he did not communicate. Silent husbands may be hard for him to open up. Some guys are like that. Hard for them to somehow share what is really going on in their heart. In other cases, a man can easily communicate, but he's kind of preoccupied with a lot of other things that are important in his life. A lot of guys are all involved with their hobbies. Guys have hobbies. And sometimes hobbies can take up so much of their time that wives kind of get set on the sideline. A lot of times guys spend a lot of time in front of the TV. This is a wonderful time for TV viewing. All the sports come together at one time, baseball, football, hockey's even starting to be played, and who knows what other things maybe are. They aren't even finished with golf yet, and certainly they're not finished with NASCAR yet. I mean, guys have a lot that they could spend time watching. And if they don't like TV, they can always spend more time at work and claim, I'm just doing it for the family. In reality, if they were honest, they would say, I like to get out of the house because it's not too pleasant when I'm around the house. You know, sometimes it's just genuinely hard for a guy to communicate. But I think wives can assist in that. You see, husbands, oftentimes, it's hard work to be a communicator. But can I suggest to you guys one other thing? You don't have to be a talker to communicate. But you better take time to be a listener. You better take these two antennae that God put on the side of your skull and put them in the position where you hear what she's saying. That's the first giant step of communication. Listen to her. And ladies, you can make it easier for your husbands to listen and communicate. And can I just suggest a couple of ways? Don't push him. Let him choose the time. When he does begin to share, would you accept what he says without judging him? Now, I know that if you jump on him as soon as he opens his mouth, and maybe what he has to say is just irritating to you, but can I suggest that if you jump on him, he's going to clam up. And you're going to lose the opportunity of maybe developing a husband who you can talk to. If you must disagree with him, and certainly every husband deserves to be disagreed with sometimes, would you try and practice it kindly, maybe even respectfully, and take the sarcasm out of your voice? Would you do that? And for goodness sakes, don't go around all day just condemning this and condemning that. He starts to say something, and what does the wife say? You ought to know better than that. But probably so. But maybe if he knew better, he would have talked differently. Or, how about this one? Really? That won't help. Yeah, that'll make him really communicate well. Probably the most famous one that is found in almost every home at some time or another is nagging each other. Evidently, no one ever told Isaac and Rebekah anything about communication. At least they didn't get it. As you might expect, the personalities of the twins were very different. Can you imagine? Twin boys ought to have some things in common. Not on your life. The oldest one, he was a hunter, and he was skill-headed. The younger one, he was content just to hang around the tent. Now, why was that easy for him? Because his mom was looking for somebody to talk to. And along came this young little kid named Jacob, right? I'm terrible at names, but I think I can remember Isaac, and I think I can probably remember Esau, and I can remember Jacob. Jacob and his mom were like two peas in a pod. Esau and his dad were like two valiant men. And though Isaac, we never read, was a hunter, he sure loved to eat what his son was able to shoot. And I'm kind of the same way. I talked to my son, and I said, "What you doing?" He says, "Well, we're going to take our dogs over and run them with some pheasants." Now, pheasants aren't in the wild here. You have to go where you can pay for them, you know, a farm, a pheasant farm and stuff. I said, "Well, if somehow you come back with a pheasant, when you prepare it, would you invite good old Dad over for a meal of pheasant?" Oh, man, wouldn't that taste good right about now? In fact, you're saying anything would taste good about right now. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, verse 27 says, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. That's often going to happen. Kids can follow one parent or the other. Parents can kind of dote on one child or another and over another. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Yeah, it's going to cause some more problems. And if you want to find out how it ends up, you remember the story. The mother hears that a blessing is going to be placed on the older one, and she has never forgotten. God said the blessing doesn't go to the older, it goes to the younger. But what's she going to do now? She's never talked to her husband about what God said. Well, if you fail in communication, then you're going to have to be a little treacherous. And you're going to have to pull the wool over your husband's eyes. And that's what she does with this younger son. And he receives the blessing instead of Esau. There it is. There it is. Didn't solve the problem. In fact, it created even a bigger problem because Esau was so ticked, he was not going to let sleeping dogs lie. He was going to kill the sleeping dog. As soon as he had the opportunity, his brother, Jacob, was dead meat. Mom found out about it. She says, what? It's going to call for plan B. So she does go to her husband this time, and she says, I just can't tolerate those women that older son of ours have brought into our home. They are wicked. They're vile. They're Canaanites. And if we're not careful, our youngest son will probably marry one of those wicked women too. Isaac says, what should we do? She said, you better send Jacob back to where I came from, because there, at least, there are people who know the living God. And they're raising children who know the living God. Isaac said, good idea. And so Jacob is sent away. Rebekah, I think, thinks, well, a couple of months and he'll come home with a bride. Didn't take long for me to come home with the guy and marry this quiet, somber man. Guess what? 20 years later, before Jacob ever returns, you know what else? Rebekah's long gone. Dead. Never saw her son again. And do you think that the older boy ever made it up to his mom what had happened? No, he didn't kill her, but it was almost as bad because he lived in contempt of her. Never a friendly, happy home. Well, I wish there was more time to talk about the treacherous end, a little bit more details, but can you see, folks, marriage calls for great wisdom. Where are you going to get wisdom? From the only one who provides it. James tells us, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Let's get on our knees and do some asking. And seek and allow the Lord to help us find, to knock and have the doors of our lives open to the plan of God. Let's follow His plan for us, not our own. Father, thank you for the wonderful plan that you made for each one of us, the plan of eternal life through Jesus Christ. It is my prayer, Lord, that if someone walked in this room this morning without knowing Christ as their Savior, that before they leave this building, they would talk to me about that need, and they would come to know Christ, who to know is life eternal. It is in His name I pray.